if you're going through an acquisition process, or even you're just building the business to sell or pass it on to your kids, that reoccurring revenue of subscription based is going to be a higher multiplier from an acquisition standpoint. That is, you're building an asset. You're not just going out and mowing lawns or installing furnaces or AC units. Like, it's literally, you're building an asset.
Do you know the standard invoice, right, or payment request is paid within 28 days? That's across the US, regardless of industry. You're going 28 days to collect a payment on a service you've already performed or a good you already sold is nuts.
So a lot of people will think that when they take credit cards, the company's going to hold it until the end of the month. But what's cool is that if you get paid on Tuesday for a job that you did, you're going to see that in your bank account on Wednesday. So not only are you getting paid faster from that merchant, but you're also seeing that in your bank account even faster too.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Profit Roadmap. We're your hosts, Ryan and Mike, and this is the premier podcast created for field service pros to help you grow your business, stay on top of the latest trends, and help you provide even more value to the communities that you serve. Now for today's show, we're super excited to welcome our guests, Heather Price and Jonathan Novoa-Miralles from Xplor Pay. And in this episode, we're going to be talking about payment processing, growth, and streamlining operations. Heather, Jonathan, welcome to the Profit Roadmap. How are you doing today?
Good. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Thrilled you guys are here.
We're looking forward to it. We're happy to be here.
All right. Yeah, it's gonna be awesome. So let's get to know you guys a little bit first. Heather, let's start with you. Why don't you give us a little background about how you got where you are today?
Well, I've kind of done a little bit of everything in my lifetime. I started out in the medical field, thankfully not working with patients. I did the paperwork side. And then I've moved on to like office management and sales. So I've always been in a business where I want to help people, whether that's saving them money, helping them on a medical path that they need to be on, or just coordinating a business as an office manager. And I felt like joining the sales role and the team that we're on would be a good transition for me to where I can call and work with merchants and customers to really help them grow their business. And I've also learned a lot in this job to offer multiple different solutions and ways that they can help. So I've kind of grown into this, and I'm using all of my life skills when it comes to working with people and helping in any way that I can. So this just felt like a really good transition, and I'm enjoying being able to help people in different ways.
That's the dream, right? Jonathan, how about you?
Yeah, I've been in software sales, at least the first part of my career. I spent a few years in software sales, and then I joined the Xplor Pay organization a couple years ago. And in my capacity, I help support our sales organization when it comes to, the resources they have, the training that they have. Are we effectively implementing how we go to market with our products, so on and so forth. So that's a high-level overview of my background.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for jumping on here. Let's jump into it with a question. We'll just kind of see where it goes. So you guys both work pretty closely with service businesses. What are some of the most common payment-related headaches that you guys see from owners when they're out in the field?
The most common that we hear is that it takes way too long to get paid. Especially in the service industry, a lot of people are still doing paper invoices. So after they finish a job, they either mail in a paper invoice or they hand it to them, leave it in their mailbox, and then who knows how long it's going to take them to actually get back to them. Because I know a lot of people will leave that on their counter, they forget about it till a month later, and it's like, oh, I need to pay this. So getting paid in a timely manner is typically the biggest thing that we see as a struggle when it comes to this type of situation.
Yeah. Mike, when you had your lawn care business, was that a pretty common struggle?
Yeah, I think one of the instrumental things here, and Heather, Jonathan, you'd probably be able to relate to this, is in the early days, we were check, cash, Venmo, whatever it may be. We had 10 different ways we could get paid. It wasn't a standardized solution. So yes, things fell through the cracks. We'd get paid. If the guys were taking cash in the truck, they'd put in the glove box, wherever they did, it would literally disappear. So I think it was a very instrumental change. If anybody's listened to this, is one of my mentors, Jonathan Toshnick, was the co-founder of Service Autopilot. Had this at this point was a radical idea, but I think it still is kind of, to most service businesses, a radical idea, is the fact that you literally require 100% of your client base to use credit cards on file. No cash, no check, no Venmo, no IOUs, but literally it was guaranteed payment. And literally, if you ran all the cards, let's just say this everything from last week, this Tuesday, the money was in the bank based on a Clearent credit card processing, literally on Friday when payroll was there. So it was guaranteed cash in the bank. So I think that was, I guess, in my service business, one of the most influential shifts. And I'm curious, Heather and Jonathan's take as we go into the different myths about payment processing and the other things that we don't know about. Because I know there's a lot of cool things Clearent is doing right now that I think a lot of people are really unaware of.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's I'm in Florida. I'm in South Florida. There's service businesses everywhere. My mom has some service businesses for lawn care, pool care, so on and so forth, right? And it's always historically been, even growing up, always been cash, check. Even today, it's Zelle, Venmo, like these more consumer-based transaction platforms. And there's a lot of benefits, which I'm sure we'll get into during this conversation, as to how do we implement payment processing in an efficient and cost-effective manner, right? And I think there's a lot of probably objections or myths around payment processing as to why a merchant within the field service industry might not want to pursue it. But there's also a ton of benefit, right, in both the short term and the long term. So I'll mirror Heather's point. I think the biggest thing when it comes to probably like the biggest objection or probably the biggest obstacle is like, how quickly can we get paid? We've done, right? And how reliable can we implement our cash flow policies within our business?
Yeah, absolutely. To tackle one of those myths pretty head on, I think one of them is that like the idea that having some sort of like modernized payment solution is something that's really tricky.
Yeah.
I think that's less of the case over the past, several years, 5-10 years, especially Field Edge Service Autopilot coming in with Clearent and offering just like an all-in-one solution. You don't even have to change apps and stuff like that. Would you guys say that a business owner who's on the fence should look at making that switch? If they're still using Zelle, Cash App, Venmo, what IOUs, whatever.
Yeah, 100% make the switch. And I'm a very data-based individual, right? Mm-hmm. Like there is data that there's been studies in the past on the popularity of credit card processing post 2010. And today, at least as of 2023, 73% of North Americans get a credit card by the age of 25, or by the age of 25, right? 62% of the U.S. market or consumers in the U.S. regularly use credit cards to pay for goods and services. So we're seeing this common trend towards consumers, especially in the U.S., that they're using credit cards as their main form of payment, right? So, and we run into this a lot. And we talked about myths here, like, should we move over to payment processing if we don't have a payment processing policy or standard within our business? Like 100%, you have to meet demand in the marketplace. And if your clientele, if your consumers are primarily using credit cards, what's the hesitation as to why you wouldn't want to implement that, right? Why would you not want to make it a little bit more flexible for your clientele and your consumer base? So that's always been my frame of thinking, right? Like we have to be successful if we're going to grow. As a service-based business, you have to meet that demand.
Yeah, it's interesting. I can see that 100% as a consumer, even business owner. We're trying to get those credit card points. We're trying to utilize those credit cards, not really using it to rack up debt, but we're using it to actually get the benefits of the card. Now, I'm kind of piggyback on Ryan's question there, kind of hitting it head on. I guess as a business owner, a lot of times from the things that we see is the biggest pushback is the 3.5%. Why would I want to give that away? So I'm curious your guys' take. I've got some insights on that or thoughts, but I'm curious you guys' thought, like, how do we overcome that objection by a business owner? And what are your thought process around those processing fees?
Heather, do you want to take? We can tag team. I think there's a lot of different to this.
Well, when it comes to that, we try and show them that the faster that you get paid, yes, there is a little bit that's coming off the top end, but ultimately offering the ability to accept credit cards, you're going to get paid faster, especially on auto pay. So if you're cutting someone's grass every 2 weeks, you don't have to go to them every 2 weeks and try and take a payment from them, try and track them down for a payment. You can set them up on auto pay. So it's less time in the office that you've got people trying to track down your customers to get paid. So we recommend they look at it as, yes, there's a little bit being taken off the top, but look how much time you're saving in the office by not having to track these people down. It's just automatically going to come out of their bank account or taken from their credit card, charged on their card. So if you have office staff or if you're an owner that does all of the billing, that's going to give you more time back in your day to maybe cut 2 more lawns that you couldn't have cut before. So you kind of have to look at it as a different way that you're saving money. You're being charged a little bit for this, but you're saving money in the long run, possibly being able to work more, make more jobs, which is going to bring in more money.
Yeah, I think, Mike, to add to your point, we also have to keep in mind there's different pricing models and different structures, right? Like, it's not always going to be like, hey, I'm losing 3% of my revenue every time I'm running a transaction. And we have different structures, and that can be discussed with the merchant ultimately. And then there's also cost saving programs that you can utilize to help cut some of those added expenditures, right? So it's not always going to be like, oh, I'm losing 3% on my transactions or 2.5% here and there, whatever it is. Ultimately, there are plans, there are programs, there are strategies that you can utilize to either cut costs or negotiate different pricing structures or models and whatnot that makes sense for you as a business owner, right? So it's not just a flat amount every transaction.
Yeah, I could agree with both you guys more. If you're listening to this, you're using Clearent, reach out to them. I know they got some really cool programs that we've seen in the last 12 to 18 months, just like Jonathan has talked about here. And I guess the other thing, just some insight too, because a lot of times that's the roadblock or the hurdle we see mentally. As a business owner, at least in my opinion, Ryan, I don't know about you, but I would say, hey, if it is 3.5%, build that in your overhead recovery budget and just plan on 3%. Added to every job, and you've already recovered the cost. But the time savings, how they're like, you nailed it. Absolutely love that. And then from a cash flow standpoint, and whether you're in HVAC, lawn care, plumbing, whatever that is, even if you're the solo entrepreneur, like, you are buying time back to actually generate more revenue, and you're probably going to have the ability to screen out those potential people calling your office, like, hey, we require a credit card on file for the inspection of your furnace. Those things are going to obviously start to buy that time back. So I love your insight on that as well. Brian, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that or kind of.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree absolutely with you, Mike, there. So I think a lot of business owners, they see, I'll use 3% as the number. Yeah. They see that 3%, they're like, oh, I'm losing 3% of my revenue. Well, to Heather's point, you're saving that time, right? Now you can go cut more lawns. You can, have your technician, or if you're the technician, you can go run another, repair job, whatever it is. That's easily going to take care of it probably for, as much as it's an issue for that month. But the other thing is, to Mike's point, build it into your overhead, account for it there, and then you don't have to worry about it. What I don't like to see necessarily is when a business owner will like put a charge on an invoice and like say, hey, here's the 3% increase in the price because you're using a credit card, right? As a consumer, I don't like to see that. But as someone who helps businesses a lot, I just think it's unnecessary. And building it into your pricing and everything, it's not something that's surreptitious. Like, you're not like ripping anybody off. It's just the cost of doing the business. Yeah. So it's not like you're lying to somebody by doing that. I absolutely don't feel that's the case. But build it into the overhead, put it in your pricing, account for it, save that time, but also be aware that the time you save isn't going to show up on your P&L sheet the way that you think it's to. It's not like, oh, well, now I'm processing credit cards, so I've made this much more money. Like, you have to do comparisons and stuff to figure that stuff out. Maybe that's a mindset shift. Maybe the next episode we'll talk about accounting and P&L. Mike, I'm sure you'd love that. But yeah, that's kind of where I stand on the whole covering the charges and the costs and everything.
I guess another question for you guys, obviously being the experts in processing, there's this thing called PCI compliant. What is it? Why is it important? What does that matter to a service business? And is there certain, obviously legal disclaimers, like obviously check with a professional or attorney, but what are the things we should be doing in our office? And maybe what are the things, maybe writing down credit card numbers on sticky notes, maybe we shouldn't be doing?
Oh God.
What's the best practice? And obviously when you're using a system like Clearent, like obviously a lot of these systems are built in, but if you're listening to this and you're not potentially using a processor, you're shopping, what are the differences and what are the things we should be looking at?
Yeah, I think at a high level, one of our biggest priorities is going to be security, right? Like, if we're processing cards, if we're taking essentially merchant data and customer data within our network, like, we need to be able to process these payments and authorize these payments in the most compliant, or rather the most secure manner, right? So to your point, Mike, like, yeah, we want to avoid writing down credit card information on a sticky note and then leaving it on a office office desk, right? And I've seen that.
That makes me cringe.
Yeah, I've seen that.
It hurts.
And you just never know, right? Like, you never know, and it's not a horrible habit if like you're a one-man show, but like think about if you're running like a 20-man operation or whatever it is, or if it's outside an office and you drop it, like that's just stuff. Again, when we're handling personal data, we have standards of performance essentially, and if we can operate at a high level of security and authorize transactions at that level, then hopefully, like, not only will you trust us as a merchant, right, as a business owner, but we're providing a service that you can take comfort in, essentially.
And one cool thing with our service is that they don't have to tell you over the phone what their credit card number is. We have ways for you to send them a link to where they can put their credit card information, and then we as a business don't ever see that full credit card number. It's all encrypted. All we would really see is the last 4 digits. So even if you were going to go verify a credit card number before you charged it, all you see is that last 4 digits. So there's no way for someone in our company to go in and steal your credit card information because that is all encrypted. So that's partly what we really rely on for the security, is that number is not given out. They no longer have to give that card number over the phone if they're not comfortable with it. Some companies ask for it by email. We would never do that. That's the good part about having it saved in the system, is that you never have to tell it over the phone. You don't have to email it. We'll send you a link and you can put it in yourself. So it makes the consumer feel a lot more comfortable that they're not just giving out their card number to anybody under the sun that could take it or see it.
And Heather, if I could touch on that, because I think this is the other, I guess, for people listening that are used credit card processing, thinking about it, I think one of the biggest hurdles we see in a service business is Mrs. Smith calls in, and I think there's an assumption that when they handle the card through the form or they over the phone and it's entered in, that credit card information, that data is actually not stored in a software like Field Edge or Service Autopilot. It's not natively in the software. Do you mind speaking that? Because I know that's one of the biggest hurdles. Like, I don't want to give you my personal information because it's going to be unsecure and it's going to be living inside your specific software in your office. They're assuming like almost on their desktop per se.
Yeah, typically what happens is there's an encryption code where our system will keep it on the back end. So even if you call me with your credit card information, once that's inputted into the system, it is kept in our encryption survey. So I can't go back and look at it. So all we would see would be the last 4 digits. So all that customer has to know is that's encrypted in the background. And if you were to export that information, it would have to be pulled from tokens. The companies would work together to pull those tokens together. So even if we export that information, we still don't see it. It's completely encrypted in our servers. So that way, no one can pull that information and steal it.
Awesome. All right, for you the question. I guess if I could just piggyback, and I want to hog, but I think that you've actually just nailed like the other biggest question. So we have a lot of people coming in to Service Autopilot or Field Edge by Xplor, and their biggest concern is, well, how do I actually take my data from another software? I'm using whatever, without mentioning the names, I've got 3 or 4 different credit card processors. I've gone and it's taken me years to get all the information and have this credit card. A, I don't want to go through the headache of calling every. B, that's probably going to cause a little mistrust from the consumer. Like, well, why do you want this? So you mentioned tokens. So how does a consumer potentially, if they're coming to Service Autopilot or Field Edge, actually go about this tokenization process? What I've seen on the end as a certified advisor, that it's a very smooth process and actually relatively quick process to actually move over to these different platforms.
Yeah, the teams have made it very easy. And what happens is that the merchant that owns whatever software they're currently using, they would request the tokenization from that software. And then that token goes straight to our software solution. So the merchant doesn't have to handle all this information. It's not going to come in like an Excel spreadsheet or anything. It's these encryption codes that basically go from one software to another, one system to another. So that information is not publicly shared. So
Yeah.
it's all encryption codes in the background data. So no one in the process is going to see it.
Yeah. Convenient for the business owner. It also helps with accountability, right? Like the business owner doesn't have to worry about touching really, really sensitive information,
Exactly.
mishandling it, right? If you
Yes.
don't know what you're supposed to be doing, then, you could end up in some trouble there. But absolutely. And I'll speak more for the field edge side because I'm not exactly sure the way the Service Autopilot runs. That's a little bit more Mike's domain. But like even on the field edge side, like if you store a credit cards or customer's credit card information inside a field edge, we phrase it that way because it makes sense. But like the actual credit card data doesn't live inside of Field Edge's database. It's all handled on the Clearent side. Like it's all encrypted. If you exported that information, it would look absolutely crazy, and you're not going to be able to decode it without whatever the encryption key or that token is. So, absolutely. Mike, you ever look at someone's data and they just have like credit card numbers in a field it's not supposed to be in?
So it's well, I guess actually it speaks to the integrity of one of our core values at Simple Growth. But yeah, we've actually had a few clients that have actually used fields like note fields or custom fields.
I've seen that.
And we will actually not allow our team to log into someone's instances if it's actually visible, because we don't recommend that. A, it's not probably legal, but B, we just like it's such a breach of information that we literally say, hey, you need to clean this up. Even if you're giving us permission to log in your system, you got to clean that up. And I guess kind of like a telltale story here, we've talked about the implications of not doing the right thing by being PCI compliant. There was a local fertilization company 3-4 years ago that sold a national firm, without mentioning the name, came in and bought them out for millions and millions of dollars, well over 10 to 15 million. Large acquisition. But this company had handwritten paper carbon copy contracts, and at the bottom they had all the credit card numbers. So 15, 20 big Rubbermaid totes, they loaded into the guy's SUV or truck. After the acquisition, the paperwork was final, the dust had settled, the check had been sent, and they came in, I believe, the next day to pick up these bins of the contracts they had bought. And the gentleman driving the truck rolled down the window, and 80% of the contracts blew out the window down the thruway. It was on the news. And people's credit cards information, address, phone numbers, everything blew down the highway.
Oh my goodness.
Yikes.
He told the business he was good, he got paid, but literally the company that acquired them probably didn't do enough due diligence and said, hey, there's a value to have this, PCI compliant and it stored somewhere secure in the cloud. So literally the acquisition went sideways. Like 90% of the clients left because they didn't trust them because their personal information was going down the highway. So just kind of a real life story. Like the stuff we're talking about might not be the most interesting or like intriguing stuff, but you got to do your due diligence, in my opinion. If you are looking for a software, there's a handful of them out there that are actually not necessarily tokenizing, but holding that stuff still natively on their platform, which is, in my opinion, probably no now with all the technology. Back in the day, that was the way it happened. So what we're talking about here with Heather and Jonathan is really, really important if you haven't looked at it in the business.
Yeah, and I know there are potential legal consequences if you store that information incorrectly. Heather, Jonathan, can you guys speak to that? I'm not asking for legal advice. I just want to be clear. None of this is legal advice. But like financially, there are some concerns there as well. So I want to bring those up.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think as a business owner, like the more liability you can stay away from, like obviously the better. Like to Mike's point, that example of just credit card information and personal information flying out the window, literally speaking. I mean, that's a huge liability, right? And that's a huge threat as well, not only for your consumer base, but we want to think about it like at the end of the day, when you're running a service-based business, you're earning not only earning your client's business, but you're earning their trust, right? At the end of the day, from a legal standpoint, if we're doing things that are not compliant or probably not of the utmost security standards, right? You have this looming cloud over your head on what if this happens or what if that happens, right? And that's what we try to stay away from. So, we want to stay away from potential lawsuits. We want to stay away from litigation, so on and so forth, should the worst case happen when we're talking about personal information and personal data. And like I said earlier, like our biggest priority, or one of the biggest priorities we have really is how can we perform, or how can we offer the services that we have within our organization to the standards of security that our clients demand, right? At the end of the day, we try not to drop the ball on this or compromise on that. Like we want to make sure that your personal information is secure, is encrypted, so on and so forth. So again, like, of course, it's not a legal conversation we're having, but we want to do things that are right by our client standards, essentially.
I guess one thing we haven't hit on today, and I'll pull it out, and I don't think it's even on the show notes here, but so we've got a lot of people watching here that they're doing really big high ticket items. So maybe in the lawn care industry, we're doing design, build, construction. We're talking 70, 100,000 plus.
Yeah.
HVAC, some of the plumbers and that are watching this, different industries. We're doing installs of furnace systems, things like that, AC units. There may be a pullback, even if we added the 3% in there, they may not necessarily be as competitive. I know Clearent by Xplor, depending on the platform, offers some ACH services. What are the things and what are some certain thresholds that we should be looking at for ACH? Maybe explain what it is if somebody hasn't heard about it, but basically, what are the thresholds? When is ACH a better fit than credit card processing? What are kind of some ballpark fees? Obviously, there's still going to be an expense to it. But maybe just kind of highlighting the ACH option and there's some pros and cons of it. When's it a good fit for us in these businesses?
Yeah. The good thing about Clearent is that we have multiple avenues on how you want to collect payments, right? ACH, credit card, debit card, so on and so forth. ACH, from a high level overview, is taking funds from an actual bank account and transferring it over to another bank account. Contrary to credit cards and debit cards, well, focus on credit cards. Contrary to credit cards, where you're essentially using a company's funds to pay for a good and service you just purchased. So there is a cost, of course, to ACH, right? Most of the time, it is a minimal cost compared to credit card processing costs. But we have multiple field service clients that have both ACH and credit card processing, and they leave it completely up to their clientele on how they want to pay, right? And depending on how they structure the cost and if there's cost saving programs involved, again, that's completely up to the clientele on how they want to pay for it. But ACH, credit card processing, whatever it is, like, this is something we can handle in-house. So Heather, I don't know if you had a different train of thought on explaining ACH versus credit card.
No, you explained it very well. We see a lot of ACH when it comes to the merchants that have big ticket items, like you mentioned, Mike, that don't want to put, $6,000 on a credit card. And a lot of times when you work B2B, those companies still want to pay by check. So this is actually using ACH, giving them the opportunity to still basically pay by check, only it's a more efficient way. They're just pulling straight from your bank account versus a credit card. So it's still giving them the option to pay like they normally would without that paper check. So they're actually saving money, and it's a lot easier. It saves them time, not having to pay for paper checks. If they don't want to do that anymore, they want to get up in the times, but not use credit card processing. So we see ACH a lot more for those larger ticket items, but even some people don't want to use a credit card, even if it's, I'm just mowing, someone's mowing my grass twice a month. I don't have a credit card, or if it's, a young person or an older person that don't use credit cards or don't trust them, ACH is a good way, even for small ticket items. You just pull straight from their bank account. Or, if their bank charges fees for cards, things like that, they want to use check instead. This is just a little bit of a more modern way to pay with their bank account versus a credit card.
Awesome. I'm having flashbacks right now. The early days of Callahan's Lawn Care, hundreds of checks each day, like literally having to go to the bank and drop them off for somebody. And then when they had in-house scanners, we had to buy extra stock and Band-Aids because the girls in the office literally were going to die from paper cuts, scanning hundreds of checks each day. So, it's really cool that you can set it up on an automatic transaction and literally you don't have to take the girls down for blood transfusions once every month.
Exactly.
This is big. And I guess kind of diving into that piece there, kind of pulling back the layers. So this sounds great. But no matter how good your service is or how well you qualify these clients, maybe we could talk about chargebacks, kind of what that process looks like. But is there certain things that a service business can do based on terms, conditions, ways to protect ourselves? Because at least in my opinion, there was absolutely nothing worse than going in, doing a couple $100 job. Person was an absolute deadbeat and literally had no intentions of paying you, and they literally charged you back. You get dinged for an upfront fee, which isn't your guys' fault, but then you actually have to dispute it. So is there things what does a chargeback process look like? And is there things as a service professional we can do to proactively protect ourselves and make sure our ducks in a row? So when that does happen, not if, we have some recourse.
Yeah, I'll take the first part here. I think a great best practice as a field, as a business owner, is something we talked about earlier on the call, is having a credit card on file, right? Because not only is that a little bit more secure, like, hey, we know that we have a card on file that we can charge, but you're able to project how much you're going to make over the next couple of weeks or month when you have a credit card on file and you have recurring jobs as well, right? So there is, I think, overall, that's probably a good best practice, is accepting customers or probably mandating your customers on, like, hey, our policy is to have a credit card on file, right? We have some customers that have the ability to have multiple credit cards on file as well, right? So if one worst case scenario, it happens often, right? Like someone will lock their card because they have potential fraud on the card, but we have another form of payment or another credit card on file that we can tap into should the first one or the primary one not work, right? So there are a couple things that you can do to probably set yourself up a little bit more for success when it comes to payment processing. And I think out of like all the things that we can probably think of, mandating a credit card on file is not so out there where a lot of customers would reflect or rather deny, but it's something that protects the business a little bit more job to job.
And some of the solutions that we offer, you can actually create a contract in a way where they have to agree to have this auto drafted, to use this credit card. They have to sign something that they agree that, $50 is going to come out every 2 weeks or whatever that price is. So that way, if there is a chargeback, you have this document saying that they agreed that you have permission to charge this card on these dates. So that can help in the chargeback process. But we at Clearent have a team that handles chargebacks for the customer, and we'll keep all that, and those payments, those receipts and everything are saved in our system. So that way, in case you have to call in and say, this person, we just got this chargeback, what's going on? They have all that information saved in the system. So that way you can provide proof showing that you had permission. This is when it was charged. This is the name on the card, so on and so forth. So you have a sort of protection built in for those chargebacks in case that does occur.
Awesome. I know at least some of the electronic signature on the service autopilot side. I'm not sure on the Field Edge side. Time and date stamped with IP address, electronic signature. The ones we've seen, in the early days, that definitely that if you're listening, that definitely helped in that process.
Yeah, absolutely. There's documentation and stuff inside of Field Edge that also helps out with that stuff. And it's, again, date and time stamped. It's on the invoices. Gives you guys that data that you guys need to be able to dispute those. Talking about mandating credit cards and stuff, I know a decade ago, back when my hairline was a lot more forward, there was a lot of resistance from customers to give out their credit card for something that renews, for something, especially something that wasn't like Netflix.
Yeah.
Right. I like to think that's softened up a bit. What are y'all's experience? All three of you guys. I know, Mike, you've got some hands-on experience with it. So
that has softened up a lot. And when I was thinking about this the other day, I feel like everything nowadays is a subscription-based model.
Everything is a subscription.
Everything's recurring. Everyone, you have this pie of what is your personal income for the month, and everyone out there just wants a little bit of that pie on a recurring basis. Everything. So it's softened up. I think the market has reached a point where it's normal, right? I have Netflix, I have this, I have that. Their services are whatever, even their personal services are completely on a recurring basis or subscription basis. So we don't really, we tap into that. We offer services that allow our merchants to offer recurring payments. And we don't really get a ton of feedback, or rather a ton of objections on we don't want to do recurring. We don't want to have our customers do that. That's unheard of. In a way, recurring revenue month over month, you're able to project it a little bit more accurately. So to your point, I think it has softened up a ton. I think we've reached a point where the market is this is the new normal, and it is what it is.
Yeah. And honestly, people can get lazy these days. So if something's going to come out automatically for them, they don't have to deal with it, on a weekly or monthly basis. They're like, go for it, take it automatically. I don't want to have to manually go in and pay this bill every month. So it's a convenience thing nowadays as well.
Yeah, and I think to add to Heather and Jonathan's point too, the consumer going out to actually buy your lawn care or different services is going to be like expecting that at this point. So if you're not offering that or it's not an option, like literally that's a red flag to the consumer. Like, wait a minute, what's going on with this contractor? Are they legit? Like they should actually have this option. But kind of taking a different spin at that. And I think Heather and Jonathan hit on this a little bit earlier, kind of really dial in. Like if you're going through an acquisition process or even you're just building the business to sell or pass it on to your kids, that reoccurring revenue of subscription based is going to be a higher multiplier from an acquisition standpoint, or even if you're going to the bank for a line of credit, that is, you're building an asset. You're not just going out and mowing lawns or, installing furnaces or AC units. Like it's literally, you're building an asset, and the return on the asset is probably going to be significantly higher than what you'd ever get in the market. But the way to ensure your investment into that asset of reoccurring revenue 100% in my opinion is literally having a credit card on file. It's required. No matter what, we will not work you out. And that right there, when you go through that due diligence process and a merger and acquisition process, at least what I've seen working with quite a few large acquisitions as a certified advisor and my own company, that credit card on file will set you apart from a lot of the other service business and definitely get you a higher multiplier, or at least get you some leverage at the bank when you need that line of credit because you can prove the income that's coming in.
Absolutely. I know those recurring services and getting those cards on file is something that it makes a lot of sense. It's pretty easy to draw that conclusion in something like lawn care, pest control, home cleaning. HVAC does a lot of that too with their maintenance agreements. I've even started seeing like plumbing and electrical companies start having some sort of like, whether they're inspections or, they'll go in and they'll offer maintain equipment and stuff like that on an agreement level recurring. So there are options for you pretty much regardless of what field service you're in. There is something that you can do where you can start building that asset, like Mike had said, to really, really help you with your exit strategy.
Yeah, so I was going to say, before you wrap it up, Ryan, the final thought too is literally waiting for that money at the end of the month. You can run those cards weekly is going to revolutionize your cash flow in your business. You are literally getting paid before you actually hit your payroll, and your payroll is your biggest liability, your business expense. So if anybody's listening to this and they're questioning, maybe the 3% or legalities and things, A, it's going to make your life easier. B, it's going to save a lot of time. But C, cash flow is king, especially going into the season. Depending when this airs, the next 5 or 6 weeks, most lawn care companies are going to be in full swing. Obviously, like our HVAC, our plumbing, electrical,
they're going to kick up
swing. But if you're looking for a huge bottom line impact, it's just cash flow. That I'd highly, highly recommend if you're not looking at just, explore these opportunities because they're going to be a big game changer for you.
Yeah. I think that's the biggest thing that everything. I think when it comes to general, like the services that we offer as a company or any service really across the board, like you're selling value and convenience, right? At the end of the day. And I think it's beyond price. And to your point, Mike, that's the biggest thing I harp on all the time is, the standard invoice, right, or payment request is paid within 28 days. That's across the US, regardless of industry. And so going 28 days, if we're using that as a standard, going 28 days to collect a payment on a service you've already performed or a good you already sold is nuts. So the biggest thing that we harp on is we have tools, we have programs to help you ultimately get paid faster for the work you're doing. So what if we can cut those 28 days down to 14 or 10 or 7, right? And that's probably the biggest thing that we can offer is we want you to have strong cash flow. And if you want to scale as a business, if you want to continue to grow, if you have goals 3, 5, 10 years down the road, you're going to need to be able to have a grip on your cash flow. If you're not raising capital outside of your business, like you need to have a grip on your cash flow. And that's the biggest thing we harp on is how do we create an environment for you to get paid as quickly as possible for the work you're doing, right? So I think just wanted to harp on Mike's point there.
Yeah, wonderfully put. I know with Clearent, one of the benefits you guys have, again, adding to the cash flow conversation, is next day funding. How does that work?
That's what I was actually just thinking about. So a lot of people will think that when they take credit cards, the company's going to hold it until the end of the month. But what's cool is that if you get paid on Tuesday for a job that you did, you're going to see that in your bank account on Wednesday. There is an option if you want to do 2 days or whatever, but majority of our customers will do next day funding. So not only are you getting paid faster from that merchant, but you're also seeing that in your bank account even faster too. So that way you have more money on hand. If you need to go buy supplies, chemicals, blades for your lawnmowers, you've got that in hand the very next day after you get paid. So you're getting paid faster, you're having money in your account faster, and it just makes things a lot more fluid and motions a lot faster.
I'd pay 3% for that alone. One of the questions I got here is around the perception of a business in field services. Again, lawn care, HVAC, plumbing, doesn't really matter. The perception of your business is really important. Like, there's a sense of like respect that you build within your community. A lot of times it's very, very personal. You're coming into people's homes. Some businesses get worried about looking too corporate if they have some sort of digital payment solution. I guess I want to get your take on that. Where do you guys see that fall on the line of professionalism versus being personal?
The way we look at it is it's not corporate, it's professional. And in reality, they're trying to offer their customers something new and easier for them. So it's not really looking corporate. We try not to make it look like that. It's just that, hey, we're up with the times. We know life is crazy. We want to do everything we possibly can to make your life easier. And if that means we keep a card on file, we send you a link, you take 2 seconds to pay it from your phone, that's going to make your life easier. So yes, we're doing these things that look corporate, that look big and fancy, but in reality, it's just trying to make everyone's life easier. And you can still have those personal touches. You can still personally call these people on the phone. You can text them, whatever your normal process is when it comes to communicating, you can still have those. If you want to take a check, you can do that. It's not eliminating the way that you're taking payments. It's just adding new options. And it's truly trying to make things easier for the customer. So they're not having to stress on paying that bill every single month or worry about paying it on time, or if the mail's not going to come in time. They don't have to worry about any of that. They can make life easier, and it takes 2 seconds to pay. So we see it more as, hey, we're doing everything we can to help you. Not only by providing this service, but providing you with an easier way to pay. So we're actually becoming closer as friends because we're helping each other out. And, you can still take the phone calls. You can still go see them in person if you want to, because our services provide an option that if they want to pay by credit card in person, they can. So if they still like to have their customers, if they still like to see them in person, they can still go knock on the door and take the payment by credit card too, versus taking cash or a check. So we're still providing all those options, just adding more in.
Yeah, I don't think it's to harp on Heather's point. I think the biggest thing here is we're not trying to create this environment where we're just a corporate entity as a field service merchant. We're not trying to be too corporate. I think you're just adding avenues as to how you collect payments. And it's adding a little bit more flexibility on how your clientele pays you for your goods and services, but ultimately they can continue giving you cash or checks. It's not like we're eliminating that, but we do want to get to a point, if you're running a business, like if you add more flexibility to your clientele, ultimately they end up a little bit happier, right? And they can pay however you like, but ultimately we're just creating different avenues to how you accept payments.
Absolutely. I know from the consumer end, one of the most frustrating things for me is if I'm trying to give someone money and it's a pain. Yep. I'm very much I'm sure you guys have all seen the picture from Futurama where it's Fry and he's like, "Take my money," That's very much me. And if I'm trying to pay someone for something and it's a pain, like, I'd rather get it somewhere I don't have to do that, because I feel like paying someone should be easy. Like, the business exists to take my money. Like, let me give you my money. That's my personal take. Mike, I don't know what your opinion on that is.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, Ryan, for sure. That's definitely the case. We're almost not only making it harder for our consumer, we're making it harder for our business as well. And we did a process of like all the SOPs and things you had to do, and you got 20 different types of ways you're taking payment. I think obviously you want to offer some options, but consolidate it down so it's not overwhelming as well.
Absolutely. I want to talk about something a little positive. So you guys work with business owners and implementing payment solutions and stuff. What are some of the biggest surprises that you guys see from business owners after they implement payment solution?
The biggest surprise for them that we see is they are truly surprised how quickly they get paid. I had a merchant that I worked with that she had one certain customer that always took 30 plus days to pay. Never failed. Every single time, it was always at least 30 days. And the first time that she sent them a payment link, she got paid within 2 hours from that same company that took normally 30 days. So I think as much as we harp on and say, hey, we can help you get paid faster, once it actually happens, they are so surprised and so happy and so grateful, especially when it's smaller companies that really depend on getting paid quickly and accurately. So I think that's really the biggest surprise, is that it truly does help them get paid faster.
Yeah, I'll mirror that. I think speed of payment. I think another surprise is just once they're set in on like the sheer convenience factor of accepting forms of payment that isn't just cash or checks, right? I know someone who still runs that old school, like collecting checks, and then like their clientele are sending it via mail, and then there's always the excuse of like, oh, like I got lost in the mail, and twice a week they got to run over to the bank, deposit the check. So I think once he got into modern payment processing, and then a month down the road, he's like, oh, like I'm in the office a lot more. Like, oh, like I'm not having so much headaches with my customers. I'm just getting paid faster, more conveniently. I think that's another surprise, is the sheer convenience of my entire week just shifted because I have an extra 30 minutes or an hour where I'm not running to the bank all the time, or I'm not calling, the same 2, 3, 4 customers on your check got lost in the mail again, or like, hey, you're late on your payment again, so on and so forth. So I think the convenience factor is a huge positive surprise.
And I guess one of the questions a lot of times, like, I'm bought in, we're going to do this processing thing. But what do I do when these cards are about to expire? I know through automations on a lot of platforms, we can send out these PCI compliant credit card forms, which actually like 45 days out eliminates that process. Is there other solutions within the platform that automatically update the cards so that process is even needed sometimes?
Yeah, I mean, there are notifications sent out, right, to the clients on, hey, your card is about to expire, right, and we need to update that information, right? So you're aware of it ahead of time. I don't recall exactly what the threshold date-wise is, Heather, unless you do. But you're
I'm
aware.
not sure exactly how soon it sends it out. No.
Yeah, but the system will send a notification on like, hey, you have a payment, or you have a payment method that's about to expire, and it needs to be updated, or you need to add another payment method, essentially.
Yeah, I know inside of Field Edge, the way it works is we have our communication templates. One of them is the credit card expiring. So if somebody has a card on file and they have like a recurring service, like their maintenance agreement or something like that, we'll check 30 days ahead of time. And if it's going to be expired by their payment date, it'll send out. So that one sends out from Field Edge directly, but it has the links and stuff in there that link to the Clearent portal that, they plug in their information. Again, never touches the Field Edge database, but I know with Field Edge, we do it 30 days ahead of time.
Yeah.
Do you guys have any final parting thoughts you'd like to share with our listeners today?
Final parting thoughts. Yeah, I think it's something I touched on earlier. I think we live in a world where we want the most amount of convenience, the most amount of comfort in the way we operate our businesses. And ultimately, payment processing delivers on that. So we want to be able to provide convenient services for our clientele, for our merchants, right? We want to be able to do so at a very high security environment. And just take us, if you've been on the fence about payment processing for a while, or if you've been putting it off for a while, I think the biggest thing is like, let's meet the market where it sits right now. And a vast majority of consumers are paying with credit cards. So just add a little bit more flexibility as to how you operate the business, right? There's a ton of benefits for it. I don't think there's a huge drawbacks. I think what we touched on earlier, the biggest thing was more the pricing stuff, like 3% off the top or this and that. But meet the market where it sits right now, right? And the more convenience you add to your clientele, the more flexibility you add to them, you'll be surprised at how your business turns around, or how your business improves from that standard.
And I'd say that one thing, if you're concerned about the process, even applying for credit card processing, if you've never done it before, we have account executives and specialists that walk you through every step of the way. They're there even after you've got it all set up. You've got help no matter what. You can always call your account executive. They're going to call and check in with you every so often, see how things are going. If you need anything, you've always got an actual person to get to. not always, just, oh, here, let me call this 800 number and then hit this number and hit this number to try and get to a person to wait on hold for 24 hours. You've got a direct person that you can go to if you need assistance. And even if you just want to talk through it, you're not ready to sign the application yet, do it, talk through it. You can talk through, what all you need to do, what all you need to have, and what process is going to be, what pricing structure is going to be best. We really try and help you find the best solution that's going to grow your business. We're not here to just try and sell you on the most expensive thing or, charge you out the wazoo. We want to do what's best for you. So feel comfortable knowing that we are here to do what's best for the company.
Awesome. Well, Heather, Jonathan, thank you guys so much for jumping on the Profit Roadmap. I really appreciate you guys coming on. Also, shout out to Mike, co-hosting. Been awesome. Absolutely love it. But again, thank you guys so much for jumping on.
Thank you so much for having us. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, guys.